Welcome back to this episode of the Foster-Kinship Adoptive Parents in West Virginia. I'm Sky Kirshner in Charleston, West Virginia.
Dina Shelton in East Texas.
Marissa Sanders in Charleston.
Casey Jakes in Charleston today, but Taze Valley normally.
And Aruba as well.
Aruba as well. Aruba is just where I'd like to be.
I'm very excited today because I thought to wear my red shirt. I usually completely miss wearing red during the Christmas season, but the holidays are upon us, and we thought we would talk about holiday stress and what that's like, and who wants to lead off in terms of what's unique and what's challenging and what's wonderful about the holidays if you're a kinship foster adoptive parent.
I think this one's probably pointing to me.
Okay.
It's kind of funny. You get these kids into your home and you're like, well, we're going to have the best Christmas ever. Santa's going to bring so much stuff and we're going to do this and that, and it's going to be wonderful. And then you get the kid who's crying and screaming because it's Christmas, and either they miss their mommy or it triggers a lot of stuff. I have a kid in my home right now who hates Christmas, despises Christmas, but we set up the tree, and this year she's invested for some reason because she will not let me turn off the tree lights. I'm like, the house is going to burn down. We have to turn off the tree lights. She's like, no, it's the first beautiful Christmas tree I've ever had. We're going to leave on the tree lights. And I'm like, okay, but you have the kid that at Thanksgiving wants to sit under the table and scream instead of having the nice Thanksgiving meal with you. And to make the triggers even worse or better, I don't know whether it's worse or better, but they traditionally do their best to get in a holiday visit too. So even if you've gotten things sort of smoothed out, the parent who doesn't normally get visits or who normally gets very few visits will get a holiday visit, which will just re-stress everything.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to remember too that a lot of kids who are in foster care, the holidays are a stressful time for everybody. So there may be stress triggers from their biological home that, mom was extra stressed or dad was, or the system was extra stressed at this time of year. So there were more things happening, more trauma happening in that home. And so just by virtue of the calendar and what our bodies tell us about the trauma we've experienced, there may be some triggers happening at this time of year anyway. And then you add in, the foster parent is more stressed because it's the holidays, and there's all these other things that we don't do every day, like set up Christmas trees and see Santa and have menorahs and have, all these big family events and things that throw off the routines and add stress in those ways.
And with the best of intentions, most of the time, friends and family members may not understand at all why this time of the year is not the most happy and blissful time of the year for children who are from hard places, and why we may not choose to attend all of the parties or bring our children to all of the parties, or why they can't have all of the snacks every day, or why getting them a ton of gifts to open, even though they are so happy that they are part of the family, can produce overwhelm and meltdown versus just blissful happiness at all the new stuff, right? And so it can turn into places where we're not only trying to manage and connect with our kids and give them what they need during this time, but that we are also having to try and manage the other adults who don't understand, and getting a lot of pressure and disappointment and disgruntledness from people who want the holidays to look a certain way. And sometimes we are those people. We have this idea of how we think Thanksgiving should look, or Christmas should look, and we want to try and make that happen. And sometimes it just can't, right?
Oh my gosh, Dina, you're breaking my heart here. I'm remembering working with a family, and it came time for the family Christmas pictures. And, this was at a big family gathering. And somebody didn't want the kids that weren't biological they didn't want them in the picture. And it was like, oh my gosh, how, navigating these moments and navigating the extended family's perception of who's in the family and who's not in the family, who's a real Smith and who isn't a real Smith. It just broke my heart to hear that story.
Well, and Sky, you actually bring up an interesting point, because while there is we don't want the kids in the picture because they're not family or they're not, fully part of the family or whatever, there's also the legal issue when kids are in foster care of every year we take a big family photo at Thanksgiving when everybody's together, and then we all share it on Facebook and we put it in our Christmas cards. You can't do that with kids who are in foster care. You're not allowed to put their picture on Facebook or social media or whatever. So how do you do the family picture in a way that's inclusive, but then say to the 25 other people, you can't share this on Facebook, and you can't, so you get creative and you do things like, we're going to all turn around and take a picture from behind, and you can share that picture. Or we're going to put them on the edge, and for the people who aren't there, the kid isn't going to see what they post, or you can crop them out. Or you do it before this family gets there so that there's a picture of most everybody, and then you take one with everybody, but say you can't share that one, or whatever. You have to navigate all those difficult challenges too.
So much to navigate.
Yeah.
And then, as Dina was saying, in terms of the pressures of the holidays, I know at the holidays, if things don't go how I think they're supposed to go, I get stressed. We have family traditions. We always fondue for Christmas Eve. If we didn't fondue for Christmas Eve, I'd personally be upset. Well, this kid has traditions and we're not doing any of them. You have to sit down and ask, what are your traditions? What do you want us to do? Because like Grammy's homemade cinnamon rolls for breakfast on Christmas morning, that's what we have. Maybe they don't. You gotta sit down individually with the kid and try to figure out what will make them feel comfortable and what of their traditions do they want to bring to our family. Mm-hmm. And then you can still expect the traditions to not go quite right.
Yeah.
Right. And they might not know what you mean by traditions, because, as we've said, when you're in a system, it's like it's the air you breathe. You don't notice it until it's not there. So the kid's saying, no, I just want a regular Christmas. But a regular Christmas to them might mean this, this, and this. And, and then when Christmas happens and you do what is your regular Christmas, it's like, well, that's not a regular Christmas, because I love what you're saying, Stacy. We didn't know the details of what's regular for you because we were just looking through our own lens.
Right. And there's so many factors. Some families open presents on Christmas Eve and others it's Christmas morning, or you always have this particular kind of cookie, but I don't have the recipe for that kind of cookie, so I don't know how to make it, or, those factors. And Dina, you were mentioning the challenge of managing other adults. And I think when we have kids in the foster care system, there's a whole nother set of adults that we have to manage, which is all of the people around all those kids. So if you have multiple kids from multiple families in your home, like Stacy does, you not only have all of their biological families, who one of them might give the kid a gift and the other one doesn't, or they all have different workers and different, so for example, a CASA, a child appointed or court appointed special advocate, or a birth to 3 therapist, or somebody who might maybe they bring candy canes for their kid, but they didn't bring them for all the other kids, or they brought presents for this one, but not, you have all of those pieces to manage of the different parts of the system that are also part of your home and your family.
And then you have the kids that are, I did not do this correctly. I fostered for a long time and then I stopped fostering and I had a baby. And then I went back to fostering and the baby was used to getting everything. And so were the other kids in my home. And then I started fostering again and we would bring in new kids and the new kids would need stuff because they're new and they don't have anything. Well, if they're getting something, why am I not getting something, Mama? And it's especially hard at Christmas because all the agencies want to do this for the foster kids, or DHHR has people who want to donate this for the foster kids. And I kind of want to say, I'm taking care of my kids and my family and I want to do it all the same. And that's hard because you're not allowed to say that.
Mm-hmm. I had a family tell me a couple of Christmases ago that they had someone who was assigned to work with one of their kids came and brought like 2 garbage bags full of new clothes and toys and all these things for that child, and nothing for the other child who was the same age, because of that child wasn't on their case or whatever. So they didn't, and that kid was feeling very left out by, this person got all this new stuff and I didn't. And I think and when you're thinking, if you're the worker and you're thinking about your caseload and what can I do that would make Christmas special for the kids on my caseload, you're not thinking, and they all have 3 other kids in their home that I need to include in that process. So I think those are all some challenges that and then there's the piece of birth families. And I'm recently hearing from families saying, do we engage birth families in the holiday celebration, and how do we do that in a safe way? Do I send a gift for biomom when the child goes to a visit? Do we do an extra phone call? Do we try to squeeze in a visit? And like I just saw in a group where someone, not my group, but another one, where someone said, they said that I could supervise a visit between, in that case, it was my daughter and my granddaughter who's living with us. But that means that then I have to be in the room all the time. So I'm not spending time with my other grandchildren. And how do I navigate that? And, there's some real challenges, I think, even in that side of it.
I think one of the biggest pieces, that's the theme that starts to emerge here, is that if you're in this situation, if you are a foster, adoptive, or kinship parent, one, especially if you are fostering and children are coming in and then exiting and other children are coming in, there is not going to be a certain way that holidays go. And this is not just Christmas, this is birthdays and other special occasions and big times at school and all these other things that come up. There's not going to be a certain way that it goes, and you're not going to be able to just get on top of it and predict and control what happens. And one of the biggest gifts that we can give ourselves is to step back and realize this is a more complicated time. As much as we would love to say the holidays are just a joyful, super happy time, that's really not the case for a lot of people. And that's not just foster and adoptive situations. A lot of people struggle with the holidays. It is a more complicated time for a variety of reasons. And to step back and say, give ourselves permission for things to want things to go certain ways, and for them to know that they won't always go certain ways. And to also create more flexibility in our own minds and hearts to say, there are a lot of things I'm not going to be able to control, but there are some things that I can put some boundaries on beforehand. I'll give you an example. When we got our place with our children, we had 2 at once, and the first Christmas that we were all together was, quite frankly, pretty miserable for me because I didn't know what to expect. And everyone in our family was so happy, and thank God, right? So everybody was so happy that my kids had joined our family that no one could get them enough things, apparently. And so we had packages arriving at our house, and it was just, overwhelmed. So our space was overwhelmed. My children were overwhelmed all through the holidays. And of course, we have all these traditions. So we go to this person's house on Christmas Day, and we do these things on Christmas Eve. And that Christmas was so overwhelming for me. It took me a while to recover. And I realized after that we're going to have to do some things very differently. And this is not going to look like what I thought it was going to look like. Christmas is going to be different for us. I discovered pretty quickly that we can't control other people, and the grandparents were not going to comply with my request for fewer gifts. And it has been a source of frustration, to be really honest. There is no compliance with fewer things. And so that level of overstimulation, I said, I can either fight hard and try to control other people, or I can make concessions and build protection in other places for the overstimulation. And so we rearranged our family system and said, we don't leave our house on Christmas Day. So everybody can bring things here. You can come and bring the gifts and we can open them here, or you cannot, and we can do it on a different day, but we're not leaving our home on Christmas Day. Because what it did provide is that my children were in their space with their routines, with the foods that were at my house, that they couldn't just pull food from, because my kids would just eat sugar and eat sugar and eat, and so they had more regulation in other areas without it being a controlling space. And people were really frustrated for a few years, but that was a space that was better for our family than just trying to over control other people and say, here's how we do things. And then I made it a regular thing that once Christmas was over, the kids chose half of the gifts to put in the closet. And over the course of the year, every few weeks, we would pull a new gift out because there's too much stuff, right? But they got to choose, and that was just part of the process. We didn't open everything as soon as it came out. and they would choose. Those were the things that helped counterbalance until my kids were older. And putting those things in place, I never imagined those would be our Christmas traditions, but they worked.
Dina, I love this idea of protection from overstimulation. And if we could get a little geeky here for a minute, overstimulation for kids who have experienced trauma. I'm guessing this is partially because their amygdalas, their fight or flight part of the brain, has been so exercised that the word amygdala actually means almond in Greek, because that part of the brain is about the size of an almond. But if you've got a kid that's had their amygdala overstimulated, that thing grows to the size of a walnut. It's just like a muscle. The more you use it, the bigger it gets, the stronger it gets. And so that part of the brain is ready to trigger it at the drop of a hat. And is that why protection from overstimulation is so important? Because for these kids, their brains are they're temporarily wired to react to all sorts of things.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, because a lot of children who have had trauma experiences also tend to have sensory sensitivities, even if it's not full-blown sensory processing disorders, in addition to their amygdala overfunctioning, they also are more quickly stimulated, and it's playing into itself. So things that do not overstimulate or even maybe feel stimulating at all to some of us may hyperstimulate and then put that amygdala into overdrive, and no one else understands why that happens. Well, adults around us have no idea.
And that's going to show
what's
up.
happened,
How is
and don't
that
predict that.
How is that going to show up? Like, how would you know that? I mean, it might seem obvious, but how would you know that a kid's getting overstimulated and that?
It can happen in very, very different ways. It took me a little bit to figure this out with my son. He has an auditory sensory sensitivity. And at school, when he would start to get overstimulated, instead of shutting down or lashing out, he would start making counterbalancing noises so that he was controlling the noise that was the loudest in his head. So then he would end up getting in trouble at school because he was counterbalancing the noise. And it took a while to figure that out. And so anything that kind of seems strange, I would even say, that we start to get curious. And we've talked about this before too, that we start to get curious, go, wonder what that is, instead of what in the, like, don't do that, right? Of why would someone do this? Why would this kid make random noises at all times, even when they're being told to be quiet? And we see the regulatory processes and the balancing processes internally that re-regulate the nervous system. When he could hear himself the loudest, it was the only thing he was hearing, because he couldn't tune out the fact that his teacher had low music on for calmness, put low music on to calm them down, and I let them talk. And the girl across from him has a sinus infection and she's sniffing every 3 seconds. And another kid is tapping their pencil behind him and he can't block any of that out. So he gives himself one noise that's the loudest in his own little space. It's the only thing he hears is 1 instead of 4.
So we call this stimulus barrier in terms of the ego functions within the brain. And if I don't have a good stimulus barrier, if I can't kind of shut those things out, then I need external help from folks like a parent who's going to create this protective boundary, right? I mean, this is a systems boundary. So instead of an open door, we're going to put in a screen door to keep some of this out. Or if the screen door doesn't work, we're going to put in the storm door. And if the storm door doesn't work, maybe we're going to close the door completely and say, hey, we want to see you, but we need you to come here, just because we're kind of slowing down the amount of new stuff, so you can come here with the presents. We're not going to open them all, or maybe we'll open them, but we understand we're going to put them in the closet, just to kind of slow down that onslaught of stimulation that's too much to handle. Wow.
And then we have the choices as parents to see this as something that's overwhelming, to figure like, oh my gosh, I have to fix this right now, or as a puzzle and a process to be solved over time. We tried a whole lot of things. For 1 year, our biggest help was we had earplugs written into his 504 plan at school. He was allowed to pop earplugs in. And the teacher would need to go over and tell him to take him out, without him getting in trouble. He could put him in at any point. Both of my kids have ADHD too, and sensory overload's a lot more common. It's highly concurrent with ADHD in terms of being able to block out stimuli, right? Because that's a big issue with kids who have ADHD. My daughter was allowed to just get up, and she had a little ticket on her desk. That's what her teachers gave her. And she could just go and lay the ticket on their desk. And it was the indicator she needed a break, and she could go stand in the hallway.
Wow.
So she didn't have to say anything. She didn't have to try to explain it because she's overwhelmed. So I said, she can't tell you what's going on when it's happening. She just needs to be able to act. And so that was the system that they put in place. So getting creative and saying, how can we make this work? And it puts that back in our hands too. So it looks so different for every kid. That's just an example. It looks so different for every kid. You have to get curious and work with it and kind of find it as a balancing process and not get overwhelmed in the process with it. And this is holidays or otherwise, right?
And you might not have a lot of time to figure this out. I'm thinking about Stacy, where you got kids coming and going. And Stacy, Marissa, how's this landing with you?
I am sitting here in shock thinking about my kid going, oh my gosh, I think you just described him. and I want to really quick, and Stacey, I know you have something to say. I think we could do a whole thing just on sensory and ADHD, and I would love to. But I also wanted to touch on you mentioned sugar. And I think a lot of times just our society doesn't give enough credit to what sugar can do to kids and the volume of sugar that we give them. We've gotten to the point in my house where my son now will say, Mommy, I'm only going to eat half the brownie because I don't want to have too much sugar. Because I'm always saying to him, like, if you have all that, you're not going to bed tonight. Or you're going to be bouncing off the walls, and then I'm going to be frustrated, and it's not going to be a good situation. And like you can have some, but let's limit it. But I think that society in general, and my parents don't pay that much attention to sugar. My family and the school, we have a party and we have 5,000 tons of sugar, and then can't figure out why everybody's misbehaving.
Between Christmas and Easter, candy eggs, candy canes and Easter eggs, it's like. It's
Don't
just
forget Halloween
it's a
just came.
landmine. Oh, and Halloween. Right?
Yeah, and Valentine's Day, and there's always some sugar factor happening, and I think we don't. And in addition, we have issues with red dye, where when he has red dye, he is bouncing off the wall. It's like you're setting him up to be in trouble because he just can't focus. So he has also learned, if he gets a bag of M&Ms, he won't eat the red ones. He'll pick them out and give them to somebody. Which is good, but it's hard when everybody else is saying, here, eat this, eat this, eat this.
Stacy, would you like the last word on this one?
I was just going to say that the number one thing you have to be as a foster parent is flexible. If you are rigid, you have to be willing to expect the unexpected, because there is no such thing as expected, and you have to be flexible with whatever comes your way. Whether it's at the holidays or any other time of the year, you just need to be a little bit flexible. When you get rigid, that's when things start to explode.
Mm-hmm. And can I just say really quickly, not to take the last word, but that during the holidays especially, but really anytime, reach out for help, reach out to your friends, don't be afraid to, like Dina said, to kind of forge a new tradition. And maybe your tradition is 2 days after Christmas, we get together with our other foster parent friends who get it, and we survive the holidays, and then we have our own little tradition of, we're going to hang out together and we're going to have our limited things, or we, just reach out to the people around you who understand the situation and get your own support and breaks and help them.
So that's great advice, Marissa. Yeah, so thank you all. Thanks for joining us with the adoptive kinship foster parenting discussion here in West Virginia, and join us again for the next one.